The sun rotates on its axis. And little old Earth passes around here and does a little loop as well. And around the Earth is the moon. Now, above the Earth, around the Earth, is the magnetosphere. And the magnetosphere has optical illusions that come from light beams from outer space outside of the furthest reaches this light can travel. It's like, well, it's not the furthest reaches this light can travel, but the range of the sun's gravity, or the heliopause, has light beams coming in, and they hit the magnetosphere like that, make these optical illusions called the stars. And UAPs can go out here somewhere at the outer edges. They can find that light beam travelling in, and they can flick it over there so it appears in the wrong spot as a little trick. It looks bigger here, it's further away here, we're out here. The box it a bit, don't it? Anyhow, some of those stars that appear up there are called the 12 signs of the zodiac. They don't look like the symbols the West gave them. A Capricorn doesn't look like a goat. Aquarius does not look like a guy holding a cup. Aries doesn't really look like a ram. Pisces, sorry, it's actually Pisces first, isn't it? Pisces doesn't look like a fish. Aries doesn't look like a ram. Taurus doesn't look like a bull. Gemini doesn't look like twins. Cancer doesn't look like a crab. Leo doesn't look like a cat. Virgo doesn't look like a virgin. Libra doesn't look like the scales of justice. Scorpio doesn't look like a fucking spider. Or spider-like being. Would you been called a Scorpio, the poor bastards? And of course, Sagittarius doesn't look like a man with a horse body. Although, we can make some jokes about them. Capricorns might sometimes think they're goatsy. Aquarians, associated with the symbols of Ganymede, are a bunch of rent boys for Zeus. Pisces are into fishy business. Aries, well, they like to ram that harem of sheep up the fucking arse, don't they? Oh, that's a bit rude. Taurus is full of bullshit. And, what's the name? Gemini is two-faced. It likes to double up a bit. Cancer it's a bit crabby. They're in a crabby mood. They're moody, crabby characters. Leo the cat is narcissistic and likes to lift his tail everywhere and show everyone his brown dwarf. And as for what's the next one? Virgo. Virgos are perennially sucking because they can't get any vagina. Oh, but a country park codependents that can't get any vagina. And then there's, what's the name? What's after that one? Libra, the Scales of Justice. Oh, how each of them deserve better. Never seem to get any of that. That'll happen one day. And then, what's the name? After that, Scorpio. Okay, if you want to piss off 1/12 of the population by insulting them, That's the way to do it, calling them that. And then, of course, Sagittarians think like they're hung like a horse, but they're really a donkey's ass. So, if you've noticed any similarity between the themes of those jokes and how horoscopes appear in the newspaper, maybe, you might want to consider that it's pareidolia. That Scorpio actually looks like a box with string coming out of it. Not even a kite, a box with string coming out of it. I think more. To be fair, Gemini does look like twins. It could roughly, like Aquarius, look like a bloke, and Taurus kind of looks like it's got horns. Outside of that, not seeing any resemblance. And either way, it doesn't really match the personalities. So, is that system a system of egregores, maybe? To try and, a memetics, if you will, to try and trick people into some kind of labeling theory. Do you know what labeling theory is? It's when somebody gets diagnosed with something, and even if it's a wrong diagnosis, they start to act it out, sometimes excessively. This one's for Sam Beckman. He's going to cop a bit of hate because he's claiming he's a professor of psychiatry when he has a Bachelor of Physics. He's not actually qualified. Amazingly, this crazy bitch has more qualifications than he does, and they're not completely qualified either. But labelling theory does apply to that man, in the sense that when looking at the information he made available online, he said his birthday was the 21st of April, and some said Hitler's birthday was the 20th, but other sources said it was the 21st, so, well, 21st, okay, we'll go with the 21st of April then. It said that he came from a Jewish family in Morocco, and he went to live in Israel for a while. Based on his videos, he lived in Israel for a while in part of the IDF, and then he's moved to Macedonia or something and done TEDx talks or something. And when he was a young man, when he was graduating from his Bachelor of Physics, he allegedly got diagnosed with psychopathy. And although we can see how he might have contributed to that labeling theory does apply. If you have ancestry of any kind that could or actually did get exposed to some kind of psychopathic dictator, and you just so happen to be born on that psychopathic dictator's birthday, Hitler, and you were prone to sort of John Nash type behaviour, well, let's be honest, mathematicians and physicists are known for, to the point where it took them, 120 years of the Nobel Prize to figure out that space-time might be a projection of their minds. But anyway, never mind. Dimensional construct that was projected by the physicist's mind for the purposes of measurement. Oh, okay then. Anyway, hello 2022. Well, labelling theory is an interesting one. And Sam, this is for you. Okay, you're not going to get any respect for posing as a psychiatrist when you're obviously not. Lying like that's what a psychopath would do. However, you don't have to live up to the label. Okay? Did you put that in your bio, did you? Did you put that in your bio, put that in your label? Were you playing a game, were you? Is it not your real birthday? Because it's the internet, so you don't want people to know your real birthday? Is it the story that you're projecting? We don't know. The point being is that horoscopes can confuse people. They really can. You wouldn't want to be a Scorpio, would you? What if you're a male Scorpio who maybe took meth or something like that, and all the thought forms started to go a bit weird? Things could go a bit strange, couldn't it? What if you're not a meth head, but say Alfred Yankovic? Isn't Alfred Yankovic a Scorpio, according to his website? If that's the case, then Mr. Yankovic probably had a reason for being so ascorbic in his song Horoscope for Today, because it stands to reason that Mr. Yankovic, who might also be a bit of a John Nash himself, was sitting there and, as a young man, about to get his piano accordion for the first time, his, his pokers with, he was sitting there going, look at the newspaper in Linwood, California, apparently, back in the 60s. And he reads the newspaper, he goes, oh, what's a horoscope? Oh, you look at your birthday, that's his birthday. Oh, Alfred's going to make a new friend this week, yay! And he goes and he says, Mum and Dad, the horoscope says he's going to make a new friend this week because of people of his birthday going to make new friends. Isn't that nice? What's a Scorpio? Well, a scorpion's a type of spider, son. Ah. Wait. One in 12 people spiders? Because aren't like, isn't it like 12, they're saying there's 12 birthday types. Is 1 in 12 people spiders? No, dear, they're not. Horoscopes aren't real. Oh! Right? Okay? He's not a stupid man. But once upon a time, he would have been a kid who believed in Santa Claus. So, forgive him for that one if he ever did that. And, this stuff about this Kantian philosophy stuff. There was a nice, simple way to describe it that happened. It wasn't appropriate for some reason to do it that way, even though it was nice and simple. So we'll try it again. Okay. To understand it a bit more simply, okay, just try to imagine there's a drawing on a piece of paper. Okay, it's a drawing. Put that to the side for a minute. On the drawing, there's 2 stick figures and a tree-like object. Okay, a tree looks like a tree, doesn't it? Okay, and there are guys. Do you see the tree? It's a cartoon of 2 stick figures seeing a tree. How do you know it's a tree? They say. Well, basically, what you do is you would make observational criteria. What is the definition of a tree? Well, it's something that's made from bark and has a trunk and branches and leaves and stuff like that. And what's that object? Well, as it turns out, it was ink on a piece of paper in the shape of squiggles. So you see there that the ink on the piece of paper, the shape of squiggles, is a projection. Okay? Well, it's not a projection. Technically, that story, there'd be a physical piece of paper. Now it's just words representing the idea. And so that piece of paper with the squiggles on it is what exists in the story of the cartoon. There is no tree. That's the point. There's no tree. in that story, there's a cartoon with some squiggles on it. That the idea of tree is projected onto that squiggles to go, oh, it's best described as tree. It looks like a tree, yet has none of the characteristics of a tree, does it? It's actually a piece of paper with ink on it. Okay? In that respect, you can start to understand Kantian philosophy, critique of pure reason style, a little bit easier. Because the idea of tree is an imaginal construct. It's not to say that trees don't exist physically out there somewhere. It's not to say that people don't exist and can't observe them. It's to say in that exact moment, there ain't no fucking tree. There's a piece of paper with some squiggles on it. And that's exactly what the space-time dimension is. It's a means by which people projected the idea onto something that was real for the purposes of comprehending something that was real. So, to comprehend the squiggly tree, what do you have to do? What does it look like? Look, well, squiggly tree, no. Squiggly lines on a bit of paper, actually. Oh, wait, it kind of looks like a tree. Okay, so the idea of tree is imaginally projected onto that squiggly line. But there is no tree. There's just a cartoon representing the tree if you observe it that way. If you project that representation onto it, if you've got that imaginal construct to project the idea onto it. And in that respect, space-time, and in particular space-time, was used. As you can see, there is no line here. There is a finger projecting a line. Now, when that finger's taken away, you can see there's no line. There's no dimension. There's just two objects side by side with this projected idea called space in between. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean that there's, because if you have a look, the hand does actually fit between there, it can be taken away. There's a means by which one object can pass through the space between the two other objects. Okay? And we call that space. See all these words are representations? Apparently, if they get their fancy microscopes, they can do parts per billion. Little air particles are all in there. So it's not empty space at all. It's not really a vacuum at all. It just so happens to be the density of the air particles aren't that particularly great, and the hand can move through. So, or so they reckon. Now, of course, how you might measure densities by volume and whatever else, and these are all mathematical measurements. These are all representations of imaginary dimensions projected into places to compare variables. So the purpose of mathematics in that sense is to imagine projected lines between objects for the purposes of figuring out things about them. How do they work, what they're made from, and things like that. How do they behave maybe in different contexts? So, yes, mathematics does have its usage, and therefore dimensions such as space-time were incredibly useful for a long time. But however, they are nonetheless representational, not real. There is such a thing as physically as, that, but the actual dimension is a temporary arrangement for the comparison, and it's projected from people's minds. Trippier. So, pareidolia and horoscopes. What's pareidolia? Have you ever looked at the clouds and seen a dog? It's like that. When the astronomers got their fancy telescopes and they pointed them at the stars, they saw that the distance between the stars wasn't on a flat surface, that there was enormous amounts of distance between them, that they were operating on some kind of, model where one star of Orion's belt was over here and the other one was over there and the other one was over here. But from the vantage point of Earth, it looked like they were lined up together. the distance is far enough away that it actually doesn't really matter that they're that far away. You still look like they're coming straight at you. It's coming straight at you. Anyway, so when a UAP is bending the mirrors between ships, the light beam on the outer edge of the heliopause comes in the wrong way, and it's a magnetosphere in a funny fashion, it doesn't mean the world's a simulation at all. All it means is aliens are real, bitch, and they're playing tricks on you. And to be honest, these days, as far if you want to go by what the scientists said, well, they reckon they've found thousands of planets out there. Are they projections of the physicist's mind? Have they projected these ideas that atoms, in particular contexts, might emit particular colours associated with the photovoltaic effect or something else? And so they detect those particular wavelengths of light in little specks of photographs that their telescopes take, that it might be a planet, based on their mathematical calculations of the pixels on that screen. There's exoplanets aplenty. Right? You know what? We don't know jack fucking shit. We don't know anything. We don't know anything. We don't know anything at all. It's all projections of our minds. Now, when they turn around and they say, everything is a projection of your mind, it does, in the esoteric sense, it doesn't mean the same thing. Because they've got people with all kinds of cult shit going on. Like, they don't, okay, if everything's a projection of the mind, then why are you obsessed with 11:11 and the Lionsgate portal? Like, these are symbolic representations. There's no reason to argue that they're grounded in truth. For astrologers, though, they think that certain types of energies come from particular star systems. And in some cases, if they're into that Galactic Federation light stuff, they might argue, I heard this argument before, it's absolutely bizarre, and by someone that was witnessing UFOs with. That they didn't necessarily believe, but they knew someone who did, who was arguing that all the stars in the sky were actually UAPs from that Galactic Federation, that other person said, the third party that's never been met. And that is a bit weird, isn't it? What if they're not? What if they're two independent variables, or one plays tricks with the other? Why are they checking people for? What was the response of people if they saw something similar to argue that the world was simulated or the glitches in the Matrix? It doesn't prove the existence of a Matrix or a simulation, does it? But sure shit proves the existence of fucking aliens. Anecdotally, anyway. And that they're tricky bastards. The energies are coming from the spaceships, from the Galactic Federation light, and all the spaceships have been posing as the stars and the planets. Okay, then what are you doing astrology for? Why do you want energy coming from a fucking spaceship? Why do you want aliens fucking tampering with you? Why would aliens tamper with you? Haven't they got better things to do? You'd think so. But then again, it depends on what the situation is, doesn't it? Doesn't it depend on things like, do they have better spaceships than they say so? Well, the answer is yes, they do. Do they have spaceships that are good enough to be operated as a fleet on the outer edges of the heliopause to play tricks on people to convince them that it's a simulation? Well, that's an interesting one. How many would it take? It depends on what they're doing. The angle that the light beam's coming in, what they're using to do it with. If they had a constellation of satellites from Starlink or something like that, maybe they could use those. If you're talking about the military, that is. The answer is we don't know. But anecdotally, we can say that there are groups that have been propagating that idea for a reason. What reason is that? Well, the arguments that have been available and not necessarily proven is that in the 1970s, the Joyous Satan Ministries decided that there was the Joyous Satan Ministries or a different group? Don't know. Memory's not clear right now, but there was a group that decided in the 1970s that we're all in a great big fucking hierarchy and aliens at the top. So if you get to the top, you have to become an alien from outer space. And then after that happened, right, it took a while, for people to stop saying that they were abducted, for probes to go up their bottom, or to be told to recycle, or that Jesus loved them or something. They were suddenly being told that they had to become aliens to be on the top of the hierarchy. And then after that, they started being told that the aliens were a projection of artificial intelligence coming from the military. That the military was abducting people in this thing called MyLabs and wanted them to become aliens from outer space as some kind of platoon to do dirty work for them. And then the Christians started to argue, say, oh, that's just a different face of the enemy. The enemy's playing tricks on you. And it's like, but what enemy do you mean? Do you mean aliens from outer space? Or is the military the enemy? Or both? Well, if the military is the enemy, then why does your religion support hierarchy so much? I mean, you got angels and devils in your Christian hierarchy, don't you? And if you're Catholic, you've even got a pope. So what's going on there? Okay. The Christian nationalists are running amok in the USA, are they? Oh, okay. And they seem to be associated with fascism these days. Okay, this is confusing. Okay, and then back in the day, there's some kind of thing that went on where aliens a different version of the fairy stories, fairy abductions, fairy parades. Maybe fairies were aliens from outer space all along. Maybe even the aliens showed up and were the Anunnakis, and Anunnakis, invaded some kings or something like that, and right? Okay? A much simpler explanation was the kings had psychopathy and people didn't know how to handle it, and things got out of control. That if you actually look at the story of the Tuatha De Danann, the fairy mounds in Ireland are actual burial cairns. And people used to say that the fairies were buried there and were allergic to iron. These are actual physical burial mounds, funeral cairns, with actual bones in it that they found. And people used to say that the fairies were buried there and they were allergic to iron, but also used to say that the fairies were spirits, like elves and dwarves and leprechauns and things like that. And it didn't add up. Were the fairies a mythological story the Irish were telling, or were they the Tuatha De Danann, as one of the mythological stories that relate, which is deified ancestors basically? Or who were they? You know who they turned out to be? They turned out to be the people who lived in Ireland before the Iberians showed up after the Santorini eruption. So Santorini's exploded and a bunch of people have left in the Exodus. Some of them were Minoans and some people and Nubians. There were Nubians, or descendants of Nubians in northern Egypt. So it's a long story about Santorini. So Santorini erupted. It was a big volcanic eruption. It was absolutely devastating. The story goes that they found ash and ice cores in Greenland, and there's records in China of people going, what the fuck's that? And the events in Santorini may have been orally kept by groups around the Mediterranean for quite some time after that, and is now told as the book of Exodus in the Bible. So for you who like Bible literalism, that one's for you. Except one thing. The timing of the Santorini eruption is apparently associated with the split of the North and the South Kingdom. The North Kingdom was called the Hyksos Kings, or the Shepherd Kings. Funny that, isn't it? They don't appear to have had a leader called Moses. If there was a man called Moses there, we don't know. But there were lots of groups living there at the time, including Nubians from the south, Assyrians, Canaanites, Judeans, Minoans, Grecans, Berbers, and just generic people from the Mediterranean area. And when Santorini erupted, pretty much all those visions that people saw, a black sky, stuff falling out of it, the river turning to shit, things dying, scary stuff happened. And yes, it would have caused tsunamis, which could have caused tidal changes, which could have caused seas to part. It could have looked like that from a different vantage point, or it could be an exaggeration. Whatever the case might be, people did leave Egypt, and some of them went back to Canaan, Judea and Syria. Some of them went to Iberia. And the people that went to Iberia were the tribe of Dan. The tribe of Dan, a few hundred years later, was known as the tribe of Danu. The tribe of Danu of Iberia, now known as Spain. Then they went to Ireland with iron weapons, because it was the Iron Age. And they killed the people that lived there. And they got buried in mounds called the fairy mounds. So there are people in Australia today, and you're looking at one of them right now. This physical body is one of them, who is a Minoan Nubian descendant of ancient northern Egypt, whose ancestors left northern Egypt during the book of Exodus and became the tribe of Dan. His physical body is a descendant of the tribe of Dan, and has, believe it or not, Nubian Egyptian ancestry from 60,000 years ago. This physical body has amongst their ancient ancestors the people who founded Manoah and ancient Egypt. And those people became the Black Tribe of Ireland. And those people murdered the fairies. It became the Tuatha De Danann. And those people continued and continued and continued through the Vikings, the Romans, the Saxons, and the Normans, and then the English. And believe it or not, that patronymic tradition continued. So we will say one family name that comes from that line. It's called Clan Murfray, which means the Sea Warriors. The warriors from Iberia who came via the sea. And in the patronymic tradition, the eldest son of the eldest son of the eldest son of the eldest son was a warrior from the days of Tuatha, from the days of the tribe of Dan, and perhaps even from the days of the Hyksos kings, to be guardians of the chieftains of Ireland. And so what happened is that in the late 1700s and the early 1800s, there was what? The Irish rebellions, led by the Orange Order and the Rivermen. And some of the Rivermen were captured and sent to Australia in 1812. And those people, Rivermen and Orange Order alike, both classified as Irish rebels against the English king, wound up in Sydney Cove under Governor Arthur Phillip on the 2nd or 3rd Fleet. and their descendant, William Murfree, joined the Rum Rebellion in 1812, or closer to 1816. 1812 to 1816, sorry, the dates are mixed up. But those Irish rebels joined the Rum Rebellion and fought off the Redcoats, tried to kill them. And what happened after that was as follows. Well, the Crown didn't like that, did they? So they sent one Lachlan Macquarie over from India. And Lachlan Macquarie was a hard-ass bastard. And that rebellion got quashed. And they got put back in irons and they got whipped. And Lachlan Macquarie said, you won't be dealing rum as an alternate currency. You have to deal with English money only. William Buckley ran away to be with mob. William Murfree was in irons. And after his 7 years transportation and he got his ticket of leave anyway, and he continued the same activity that family did when they weren't acting in their other role as guardians of the chieftains of Ireland, which was what? He got an oxen cart, like he did before, to transport the guns for the Rum Rebellion, and he transported goods between Queanbeyan and Sydney. And his eldest son of his eldest son of his eldest son of his eldest son did the same thing until 1920, when they had cars and trucks and roads and trains. And their name continued to be Murfree until then. And that, dear ones, is what happened to one of the chief warrior clans, one line of descendants of many lines of Clan Murfree descendants who originate in northern Egypt. That's what happened to what happened to the lines of Clan Murfree. They continued to struggle. Now, between about 1816 or 1815 and 1920, that 100-year period, they didn't fight. They didn't take up arms against Aboriginal people either. It might even be possible that one of them had a Aboriginal wife in the early days, and it wasn't acknowledged. People weren't allowed to, or had fun, wandered off as well as possible. We don't actually know. What happened in Australia before 1901, before the White Australia policy, was there weren't many women. A lot of the people that came to Australia were men. And so that means a lot of those men have Aboriginal descendants. And in turn, there are a lot of people in Australia who might be Aboriginal and not know it. And you might be looking at one of them right now. You might be looking at a descendant of the Gundungurra that's unconfirmed. But you are definitely looking at, confirmed by DNA testing, a descendant of the Nubians of ancient Egypt. So when you sit there, Americans in particular, and you do your white versus black, Rudyard Kipling, fucking white man's burden bullshit, and you pretend his face is white, or white only, don't you forget that her Irish ancestors are actually black. This face's Irish ancestors were black. They came from Egypt. And it's confirmed by DNA testing. And also, don't you forget the horrible things they did to people for miscegenation on the Victorian goldfields, and why what his other ancestral lines, didn't know they had Maori ancestry until about 5 to 10 years ago. And why it was difficult for another relative to acknowledge their Chinese ancestry for a similar reason. The myth of Australia, as there was Aboriginal people, and then POM showed up, and then suddenly it was World War II, and the Maltese and the Italians showed up, basically, and the Greeks, and then there was Vietnam, is crap. There were 2 African men, as far as we know, if not more, on the first fleet that came from England, who were in England as a consequence of the slave trade England was doing. The North Atlantic slave trade was not just about America. It was also other European countries as well. And sometimes when those people were freed, they needed to go somewhere else. Somewhere like, Australia. Because the Industrial Revolution made a bunch of pickpockets out of everyone. So, you want to know why William Murphy was transported? Terrorism. He was part of a group of people that were fighting off the English crown before the people of Australia even knew they existed. Bonnie Prince Charlie's not going to have a good fucking year, mate. Suck shit, Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Oh, you're in for a rough ride.